Today it's my pleasure to talk to Matthew Talbot-Kelly. He's the developer, creator, and the imaginator of this whole brand new 3D iPad storytelling application. So, can you set up the story a bit for us?
Sure. Thanks, Kempton, for interviewing me. Yeah, when the idea happened, the idea came when I was watching for a second time Steve Jobs' introduction of the iPad.
Oh.
And when I was watching him, I realized when he was going through and showing the New York Times and showing you could watch movies and showing you could listen to music and stuff, that he didn't really have anything that you couldn't already do with a computer. Mm-hmm. He really didn't have what I would call the killer app for the iPad, and it immediately got my imagination going. As a filmmaker, I started to think, what kinds of things would I like to see happen with an iPad? Mm-hmm. And that was the genesis of the idea. I just started dreaming it up, and as a filmmaker, I have to have a thick skin. Mm-hmm. I've proposed many films to funding agencies and people, and I had lots of rejections, and I consider myself relatively successful as a short filmmaker. But with this one, I approached an investor, and I didn't even get into the second sentence. Didn't finish the second sentence when they said, "We want in."
Really?
So I knew I had a good idea.
Mm-hmm. So did you pitch the project to one of the local investors in Gibson, or is Vancouver or Toronto?
Vancouver. I'm not going to, Kempton, as you can understand, I don't want to go into too much detail about who my investors are at the particular moment. Mm. But I do have some partners and some advisors, certainly on the business side of things that've been very helpful. Mm-hmm. And I've been trying to concentrate on the creative side and imagining what this application might be.
Mm-hmm. So that was January, right? It seems like so long ago, but when was it? When did Steve Jobs?
I think it was later than that, wasn't it? I think it was February, or maybe it was January. It was soon after. It was maybe late January, early February.
I'll check my dates, but that's when you first saw his presentation. That's the moment you thought, "Hey, there's something that I can do here."
No, it wasn't the first time. Like when I first watched it, I was just, there was a lot of anticipation around that time, as you remember. And I remember being underwhelmed. I remember thinking, you know what, something's wrong here. Mm. And Jobs himself, who's such an amazing pitch, he's so amazing at presenting things, right? Yeah. Pitch, right? Mm-hmm. He was kind of subdued. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of like, maybe he didn't want to overstate it or whatever, but it seemed to be, at the end of it, I thought about it, and it seemed to be a challenge. I sort of thought, you know what, he's challenging us to come up with material that's appropriate to this device. And that's kind of the mandate of what I've imagined for Moving Tales. The company we've started is to come up with an appropriate use, a celebration, if you like, of this amazing platform.
Yeah. See, when I first saw the presentation, it looks cool to me. But I guess you push it one step further and right away think that, hey, there are things that you can do, and yeah. So would you say the genesis of the story? You had that story before you actually immediately went into overdrive and create the story of the Pedlar lady of Gushing Cross, brand new for this?
No. It actually, I had pitched this story as a film a couple of times. So we had the story in the can, as it were.
Oh, okay.
And it's a story. The story is based on an 800-year-old poem. So it's and the story has variants all over the world. Mm-hmm. So it's a story that's been well vetted. Like, we know the structure of this story works and has worked for hundreds of years.
Right.
So that gave us a lot of confidence, as the material. It seemed like very good source material, and it seemed to be very accessible. The thing that was different about this version of the story was that rather than writing the screenplay myself, I turned to my partner, who's an artist and a writer and a poet, and I had her write the story, and it transformed. It became a lot more playful and magical.
Oh, I see.
And I was able to work off that text, and it was interesting because it's not really. It's a text that we call it a storytelling text. It's not a text that would be. It's not like a storybook per se that you would just read, because included in the original idea was that we would have storytellers tell the story. So the text is somewhere between an oral storytelling, so a non-read story, and a text that you can follow along and displayed in the device itself.
But the current version is with the narrator reading out the whole story, right? That's what you mean? Is that right?
Yeah. So we have to work with the text, because the text the text you would write for a screenplay is a different kind of text, and the text you would write for a book is a different kind of text.
Yeah, right.
Because the text is going to be spoken, and we were putting a lot of emphasis in the spoken word. We wanted to make sure that the language had it was alive, and it had a dynamic that seemed natural, and it seemed, kind of free.
It's written to be read aloud by the narrator, and I guess if the narration is turned off by the parents or the whoever.
Yeah. And then as following on from that, we've translated this version into Spanish, and we have intentions to translate them into all sorts of different languages. For the Spanish, we hunted down a lady named Karina in Mexico who's a literature graduate. Oh. And she's a professional translator, but she translates literature and poetry. And so we really worked hard to try to capture in the Spanish the same kind of literate oral. It sort of seems contradictory, but it is kind of literate on the one hand, but it's also kind of oral and storytelling kind of vibe about the translation. And I don't speak Spanish, but I gather from speaking with Spanish-speaking friends that we've captured a nice balance there.
Right, and you've got a very nice voice, a Spanish speaker doing the narration of. I of course, I've got the application and play with it, and it sounds really cool. So the iPad application itself, I guess there are various components, right? The animations, the moving images, and whatnot, and that is. That's done separately. How long did that take?
Well, it's hard to say because we were doing R&D at the same time, right? Originally, I was very naive. I thought that I could, maybe with some of my filmmaking friends, we could work out how to do the programming ourselves, because we looked at Xcode, and we downloaded the software developer kit, and we thought, wow, this looks pretty handy. Doesn't look too complicated. But
and you have from previous experience, which I'll talk to you about those from in the film interview. But from previous experience, you have dealt with computer software like CAD design and whatnot. So you're not completely unknown to those stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm not completely unknown as a user, but I'm not a programmer. I'm not I've never worked in the back end, so. I think, that kind of willful naivety, I tried to keep that naivety, and I didn't let it deter me from the goal, which was to make this kind of, to explore this media for this iPad media for the thing it is. It's a multimedia platform, right? It's an interactive multimedia platform.
Touch and,
So, there was a lot of talk when I was 15 or 20 years ago. There was a lot of discussion when CD-ROMs came around about non-linear storytelling and multimedia, and there was a lot of excitement, but it was kind of premature. The machines weren't fast enough The frame rates weren't there, and so it really it reminded me. In a way, it took me back to when I was a young graduate, and it made I trying to follow that line of thinking, and I call it the kind of willful naivety, because if you look around and you see what other people are doing, sometimes it prevents you from taking action yourself. And sometimes it's good just to, just focus on, okay, what would I like to do? What is it that I see that's appropriate? And then explore that, and then see what people think of that, as opposed to looking around and saying, oh, look, they've done that, and let's try and copy that.
Yeah.
We kind of were in a cocoon, we kind of retreated into this cocoon and worked out some different tests. So it's hard to say how long it took, because we were working out we were doing the R&D for what it would be, as well as making the content and developing the content. I'll give you
So if I hear you right, the animation itself is not completely independent of the iPad application development. It went on in parallel.
I'll give you an example. Like originally, we assumed that what we were going to do for the animations is we were going to use sequences of images, and then sequences of PNGs, and that ended up being a bit of a dead end. Because the file sizes, you need 24 of these images per second for the movement, and basically the device started swapping out really quickly. It ran out of, we used up all the RAM effectively.
Really?
What I understood to be RAM, and so we had to approach it a little bit differently. And we sort of came up with some tricks, I guess, that seem to do the job. Now they're not perfect. It's not perfect. Yeah, that was something like so we were.
So you're talking about the 24 frames PNG that would be way too big, and then you go with a transparent layer on top or something like that.
Well, that's just it. We realized trying to do transparent layers, like that's the original idea, was to have independent layers of animation that we could jump around. That would be the beauty about having sequences of PNGs, right? You could jump from frame 1 to frame 96 in an instant, right?
Oh, okay.
Because in theory, it's non-linear. You could jump around it. The file sizes were too prohibitive because we wanted to have full screen. We wanted to take advantage of the full screen real estate. Anyway, so that was part of the research. So we weren't really, when we started laying the story out, we didn't know how many pages it was going to be. We didn't know how big the text should be, whether or not we have animation all the time on, or whether or not we turn the animation on and off according to the user. It was important. The original idea was important for me to have the text be dynamic, be a sense of playfulness and movement about the text. And do we generate that on the fly, or do we bake that text into the images? The sounds, how much sound do we have in there? I was interested in having a random quality. Right now there are a number of shots that have different points of view, and each time you launch the device, it'll choose either the camera position A or B on these shots.
Oh, really?
And so,
okay. I haven't hit on that part yet.
Yeah, each time you launch it, you're unlikely to get it look the same. It'll look slightly different.
Yeah. I mean, the pages, what appears on it, or what the stories are the same, right? But you're saying like some of the pages will have different.
The images, the images are the camera position is different.
Okay.
And at one point, what we were doing is we were building camera moves into the QuickTime movies, and that didn't seem to make sense either, because we thought it would be really interesting to be able to jump from one position to another within the movie, and we were getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah,